Victoria Beacon-Hill.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker. I'm very pleased to rise today to speak to supporting our youth in British Columbia. There are a wide range of supports that I could speak to this morning, everything from the challenges in youth mental health and the lack of specialized supports and the lack of resources and beds for youth and their families. I could speak to the challenges of children in care, the caseloads for social workers, the real difficulties that again, specialized services and children who need those specialized services are facing. I could speak to youth justice and the real lack of a planning and attention that's being given to youth justice when we see the closure of the Youth Custody Centre right here on Vancouver Island. But in the few minutes that I have this morning, I want to focus in on youth leaving foster care and the challenges that our youth are facing as they move from being in care of the government to being on their own. And I think it's important to remember that youth who are in the care of government, they're by no fault of their own because of their family circumstances or otherwise, and government is then their legal guardian and therefore has a responsibility to take care of those children. I think anyone who's a parent knows that every child is unique and that one size does not fit all. And there isn't a parent I know who decides when their child turns 19 that they should all of a sudden move out and be on their own, and that they have no supports and they're expected to manage. And yet in our province, that's exactly what happens for approximately 700 youth a year, is that they turn 19 on their 19th birthday and then there are no supports and they are expected to move out on their own. And I think, Honourable Speaker, to think about how life has changed for that age group since the 1950s, for example, where many of us in our 19th birthday were on our own, we're working, we're going to school. The kind of expectation that is here for children when they turn 19 now is completely different. Life is completely different than it was during that time period. Back then, I think young people expected one job, perhaps with one company, that would be their lifetime employment, that they would have one family, that they would live in one place, that they would be close to their extended family. Well, that doesn't happen anymore, Honourable Speaker. The cost of living is much higher than it ever was then. Think about a youth who's transitioning. Think about full-time employment right out of high school if you haven't had university or college or additional coursework. Think about how a 19-year-old could manage in the kind of environment we have today with, as I said, the cost of living and the employment situation. And then I want everyone in this House to think about a 19-year-old managing in that situation who's just come out of government care, who doesn't have the kind of supports that I think all of us have either given to our children or have seen as individuals receive from our parents. The kind of support when you're short rent a month because you haven't been working full time and you know you've got a difficulty and your parents help you out. They cover you off for that month. Or the secondhand furniture that's been in the basement of the house that comes over to your place when you get a place, your first apartment, and you've got that furniture and you've got that support from a family. Think about the phone calls home, either from your own kids or when you were a child, that you'd phone home and your parents had helped steer you in the right direction. They'd remind you about things that you needed to do that perhaps you hadn't remembered to do. Well, just imagine a 19-year-old trying to navigate that without all that family support. Think of a 19-year-old trying to navigate that who may have mental health issues, who may have had 8, 9, 10 placements and has no one stable in their lives. They're then steered towards income assistance and told to go and get income assistance, no different than anyone else out there. And think about that challenge. The kind of transition that is needed for our youth who are aging out of care is transition that will be less expensive than not putting the transition support in place. It's actually going to cost the system more to not help those young people get on their feet as they come out of care. Now, I'm sure we'll hear, Honourable Speaker, as we go through this discussion, some discussion about programs and supports that are limited but in place and that there isn't an opportunity to be able to expand that. But I believe, Honourable Speaker, that government has an obligation both moral and financial to these young people to do more. And other jurisdictions do. Saskatchewan and Ontario consider 21 as the age for children before they age out of care. Ontario, for example, provides medical, dental, extended health benefits up to age 24 for youth who've been in care, because they recognize the real challenges that youth are facing. We could look at expanding the kinds of supports for up to age 24 for our youth who need them. There are some young people who'll be able to transition. But again, I come back to the fact that every child is different and unique, and every circumstance is unique. And I believe we have an obligation to put those kinds of supports in place. Youth who are in youth agreements are able to get some support after 19, so there's been some recognition of that, but those contracts are only in place for 6 months. Well, again, if you're a youth coming out and you know you've got the 6-month clock ticking, that makes it really tough for you to settle in and try and get the kind of support that you need. Many youth aren't able to get into university and college, and while I'm pleased that we're seeing some private sector partners come forward and put supports in place for youth who've been in care to be able to access university and college, providing that stability is critical. Because for youth to even access those dollars, they need to have a stable home. Think about a youth going out and trying to find some place that's affordable when you're on income assistance because that's your only income. And then if you decide to go to school, by the way, your income assistance is cut off. You then have to find another opportunity for your income. So when I look at supporting our youth, Honourable Speaker, and when I'm speaking specifically about youth transitioning, I want to emphasize how important it is for us to take a look at this from, as I said, both a financial and a moral obligation that we have as government. These children are in the care of government. Government is their legal guardian. And certainly all of us as parents would understand that. Thank you, Honourable Speaker.